Hey guys, and welcome back to the 11th episode of the Magic Shooter tutorial. In this episode, we're going to set up the leaderboard and make the scoring system for the game. In the arena scene, create a game object called _ScoreManager. This will keep track of our in-game score. To go with it, we'll create a script called ScoreManager. We want to create a static public variable that will persist throughout the game. This will keep track of the score without resetting each time the game object is reset. So we have a static ScoreManager object. These are often called singletons. To ensure that this object is the only one in the scene, we want to have a check in the awake function. We want to check if the singleton currently does not have an object attached to it. We want to set it to this instance of the object. This specific instance will then be the one that is used throughout the game. On the other hand, if the object has already been set, destroy the new instance of the ScoreManager. We want a private variable to keep track of the current score. We'll be using something else to keep track of the high score. In awake, we want to set it to 0. In order to change the score, we need a few public functions that will be called by other scripts. The first one is increase score, which will simply increase m_cur score by the amount that we provide in the function. The next function, which will be for updating the high score, will include something we haven't covered before, player prefs. Normally, unless we use don't destroy on load, which there's a link in the description for, or a static object, information doesn't persist between scenes, because the objects in each scene are destroyed and created. You can have a player object in one scene and load the scene with another player object, but they will be different objects with different values. This implies that they won't persist between opening and closing the game either. Player prefs can help fix this. It's a dictionary of values that stays saved in the game's data so that it will persist between scenes and opening and closing the game. Player prefs can store ints, floats, and bools, and can be accessed by using playerprefs.get_ whatever type you want, or set_ whatever type you want, or for the key using hasKey. The first thing we want to do is check if playerprefs currently has our key. The key that we want to set up is HS, abbreviated for high score. If it doesn't have this, we will create it and set it equal to our private variable using playerprefs.setInt. Otherwise, we're going to compare our current score with the stored high score. We can access this by calling playerprefs.getIntHS. If the current score is higher than our past high score, then we update it. The last function that we want is something that would be called right before this instance of the object is destroyed, like when the game is being closed. The built-in function to do this is onDisable. Likewise, when an object is created, the onEnable is called. We want to call updateScore whenever onDisable is called so that the high score is always up to date. We want to attach this script onto the _ScoreManager game object. Now, we want to increase the score in the appropriate places. To do that, we firstly need to set the amount of points that the player will get for killing an enemy. In enemy controller, we want to create a new variable for the number of points that the player will get. Then, in the region health methods, we want to increase the score whenever the player dies. Like before, we want to call this right before the enemy gets destroyed, otherwise we'll never be able to reach that bit of code. To call it, we'll access a static object, the singleton that we've stored in ScoreManager, and we'll increase the score by the set amount. Back in the editor, we want to update the enemy prefab so that it gives the player 2 points for each enemy killed. The next thing we want to do is to update the high score UI. In the main menu controller script, we want to create an editor variable for the UI text object that shows a high score. We also want a private string for the default high score text. We'll be using this to set up the text that the player sees. When initializing the object, we want the default text to be the text that we had put into the editor before. To access the string of a text object, we just access it via text.text. Now, we want to make a high score update function here that updates the UI. We'll put this in a new region for high score methods. If player prefs has the key HS, then we want to update the UI to reflect that score. To do that, we want to replace the &s part of the string that we had set before. We can use the replace function to do that, and we want to make sure that we convert the high score number to a string before attaching it to the text. If it doesn't exist, then we can safely assume that the score is 0, or that the player hasn't played the game before. So we'll create the variable in player prefs and set it to 0 and update the UI. You may remember in the main menu that we have a button that will reset the high score. To do this, we'll manually set the high score in player prefs to 0 and call update high score. At the very start of the game, we also want to update the text so that the players don't see the default text with &s, and we do that in update high score. So we'll call this in start. Back in the editor, we want to attach the text object onto the main menu controller component. We also want to set the function for the button to reset the high score. So we'll drag in the canvas to access the script and the function reset high score. Now, if you have play, we have our full functioning game. Your high score should be at 0, but if it isn't, that's okay. We can just hit reset high score to reset it. And now you can play through the entire game from start to finish. You can go into the arena, kill a bunch of enemies, and then go back into the main menu to see your high score. Congratulations, you're done with the project. The next episode, I'll walk you through submitting the project. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.